Welcome to Hockey Night in New York, where Islanders hockey always reigns supreme. Whether you were raised at the barn in Uniondale or born in the stable at Belmont, Hockey Night in New York is your home for all things Isles. Now, let's drop the puck and get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Hockey Night in New York. Welcome to the program, everyone. It is Sunday, March 12, 2023, coming at you live from Florida Media in Rockville Center. Big show coming up for you tonight. Mr. Joe Buono, the founder of Isles Fix newsletter, is in-house here at Florida Media. Going to talk about his brand new book, New York Islanders from A to Z. Looking forward to that. A lot of fun there. My name is Sean Cuthbert. With me tonight is Mr. Chris Botta. Christopher, how do you do?
I'm doing great, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I'm trying to forget about last night a little bit, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good.
Just the game, or other things happen?
Oh, no,
that night? Okay.
Just the game. Not making it more personal.
I just want to make sure you're okay there, bud.
I'm doing all right. So I want to thank all our wonderful sponsors, starting with presenting sponsor Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, 217 Carlton Avenue in East Islip, and, of course, UBS Arena at Belmont. Big thanks to Lost Farmer Brewing Company, located at 63A 2nd Street in Mineola. And a big thanks to our brand new sponsor, Main Street Board Game Cafe, located at 307 Main Street in Huntington Village. More about them later. So, Chris Botta.
Sean Cuthbert.
That's me. The New York Islanders are 11-4-3 in their last 18. I stole that from NYISkinny.com. Eric Hornick, great job over there. They're currently holding the second wild card spot. The Pittsburgh Penguins the Rangers didn't give the Islanders any help today, losing to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they're in that second wild card spot, but they did have a big week, beating the Buffalo Sabres 3-2. Obviously, the dramatic overtime win over the Pittsburgh Penguins 4-3, and then last night a bit of a blowout loss to the Washington Capitals 5-1. So what do you make of this week? It was a big week for the Isles.
It was a big week. It was a good week. It wasn't a great week because Saturday night certainly dimmed that. I said, when you asked me how many points do they have to get in the six, I said 5. Now, the answer to that, 5 being at least 5, would be to continue to soar in the playoff rankings and the chances.
Sure.
What's amazing about what's going on here is that the Islanders have played very well. They're entitled to I wouldn't even call it a stinker. They're entitled to lose a game. Right?
Sure.
They're not that good. They're not that good a team, and they've certainly have been giving their all, and credit to management and coaches and all the players for that. But the concern was always that despite all those wins and beating Buffalo and beating Pittsburgh, that if they go a few days without accruing points, with so many teams in the mix, it's going to close in around them. Right. So now that they've lost that one and they don't play till Tuesday, a winnable game, but a tough game in Los Angeles, and all these other teams are playing, and most of them aren't good, but some of them are going to win once in a while. And Florida is the team that I've mentioned that I feel like is capable of going on some sort of run. They have points now in 5 straight after winning 4 straight. So it's an amazing time because every game counts, and we're really seeing that in real time because they let up once. I think they let up in part because maybe they got a little comfortable before Saturday's game against Washington. Maybe they're thinking Washington's done.
Sure.
And they might be done. And they let off the pedal a little bit, and now we're seeing the results.
Well, it's funny because going into Saturday and after beating Buffalo, it's like, okay, Buffalo's pretty far back now, even with the games in hand. I was kind of starting to write them off as far as catching the Islanders. And I think I kind of had it narrowed down to Ottawa and Florida. But after last night, you can't really rule out Washington anymore because they still have 2 games against them. So they kind of pulled themselves back into this little race here. So now for me, it seems like you got a 4-team race now for the last wild card spot. I guess you can still include the first one. Doesn't mean, Pittsburgh isn't necessarily going to win enough games to hang on to the first one.
I think I'd still say there's 2 spots available.
Sure. Yeah. But just as great as the wins earlier in the week were for the Islanders and necessary, this loss last night kind of changes the narrative again with Washington back in the mix.
It hurts, and it really hurts if they come up empty on Tuesday. We'll see. Then they have 2, again, winnable games, but we're going to see this the rest of the way. And this is a narrative I've talked about going back to when I did Point Blank, and when the Islanders have been on both sides of the equation, how the games get easier for certain teams when there's no expectations. I also think that's probably why Washington played a damn good game and why they listened to the coaches, why they implemented a game plan. I think because people people were starting to count them out. So Buffalo looks like a little bit of a pretender. I got to say about the Sabres, and I want to say the people of Buffalo are amazing. The fans there are incredible. Like, that's not the issue here, but there's something wrong in that organization. It reminds me a little bit of the Islanders during the Snow Wait era, where every time they have a little bit of a success, there seems to be some cockiness. And we're seeing it this year. Like, they actually have too much talent to be this bad. And to lose to the Islanders the way they did, to make up all the excuses about whether it was kicked in or not, which when the rule rule is clear, and then they go out and lose 10-4 at home. I mean, come on. Then they can't beat the Rangers at home. I mean, so I don't know if they're in it for real, but again, what we're seeing is whether it's the Islanders or any of these other teams, win 3 in a row, lose 3 in a row, it's going to make a big difference right now. So it's an exciting time. Ottawa again, they lose last night to Vancouver fairly handily.
Right.
Got a game tonight. It's scoreboard watching. We'll be doing this every step of the way. Butch said it last night on the broadcast that we'll probably be doing this all the way to game 82.
Oh, no question about it. And I guess we started talking about this a little bit last week, how the Islanders have been tightening up defensively a little bit, playing more of a Barry Trotz style. I think we saw that again.
Playoff style.
Yeah, absolutely, which we've said many, many times is this team is kind of tailor-made for that. And we were all waiting to see if this could be a regular season team. Can they, win enough in an 82-game grind to actually get back into the playoffs? And we've talked about how in past seasons under Barry Trotz, they kind of backed in and they lost a little bit of fuel there towards the end. And can they last for 82? And they're hanging on for dear life right now. And there's a little bit of a meshing here between the Trotz style and the Lambert style, but it's pretty plain to see that they're playing a more defensive style of hockey now.
I don't think there's any question about it, and it started probably with Barzal's injury. I am curious to see what happens when Pageau comes back. I think that'll obviously be a great addition. But my question, and I know a lot of people are asking now, is this a better team? I have my answer for it, as you can imagine, but is this a better team right now without Matthew Barzal on it?
I was just going to throw that at you, and I think the answer to that question is a resounding no. I know that there's arguments for it because of how well they've played, their record of late. But look, you also have to remember that when the Islanders played this style previously under Barry Trotz, they were also successful with Matt Barzal in the lineup. And I would like to assume that that'll be the case when he comes back. It's another offensive weapon. You like to think that that's just going to provide more of an option there between him and Horvat and Lee, if that's going to be your first line, and also the power play, where it's just going to enhance this team. Now, I think the bigger question is almost, why did they wait so long to do this? Now, as you said, Barzal may have forced their hand a little bit here.
That's what happened, yeah.
But you look at it and say, why did it take, almost 60 games to say to themselves, all right, this isn't working. Time to go back to basics, right? So I guess, and what's your answer to the question?
Yeah, I agree with you. Of course, in the big picture, they are not. I think short term, they are. I think, this happened and it forced the coaches to react a certain way. I also think it made it easier to sell it as a team concept. We're going to have to tighten things up. We talked about this last week. So in a weird way, I think it made them better for the short term. But then you watch a game like last night and go, man, I wish we had Barzal out there going into the third period at least. So it's an interesting stretch. What do you think happens with Pageau? Who looks like he's going to be the first to return?
Well, the second, because Clutterbuck came back last night.
Okay. I was talking top 9.
Oh, I apologize. I couldn't read your mind. But no, it's actually a great question, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see what the coaching staff decides to do, because they do have some options. They have a player that I want to talk about a little later on in Hudson Fasching, who's been outstanding of late.
You're a guy.
And I think that's a guy who needs to stay in the lineup next to Casey Cizikas. And I know that doesn't necessarily affect the Matt Barzals of the world, but yes, JG Pageau is going to be in that bottom 6 conversation. And, they're probably going to try to keep Cizikas and Fasching together. So Pageau will come in, and then you're looking at guys like Holmstrom, maybe is the first guy to come out, He's probably going to end up being an extra forward for the team. He's not producing as much offensively maybe as you like, but he does look like a gamer. I think he's going to be a player on this team in the future. But that's probably the first guy I go to, is Holmstrom probably takes a seat.
So what was the fourth line last night?
The fourth line wasn't Josh Bailey centering.
So that's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting.
Clutterbuck, and who was on the left side there? Joe, who was on the left side last night?
The new guy.
What's that?
Yeah,
Engvall, yes, the forgotten man.
So that
scored his first goal last night.
It feels like an easy one, but it just seems like for one night, and I'm not saying that's why they lost, but it just optically, to me, that just looks like, oh, well, now that's a team that like is off the rudder a little bit, right? Like our fourth line is Josh Bailey, Engvall, and Clutterbuck. Like that's not this team's identity. So that's a little bit of a concern. So hopefully Pageau coming back straightens that out. By the way, Engvall's goal notwithstanding, we're already seeing what Adam Proto clearly stated last week, that he's a guy who people like, but sometimes coaches can get frustrated by, and I'm playing with Adam's words a little bit. He didn't directly say that, but he's that big guy who skates like the wind that drives coaches crazy because you think he should be better, and he's in this 35 point thing, which is my way of saying like Engvall could be a scratch before the end of the season. He could be a scratch by the end.
I wouldn't rule him out
this week. Yeah,
and
so
now that
which is fine, by the way. He was always a try. It's a third rounder.
Right.
Perhaps a little bit higher end potential there, and I'm okay with that. Like to me, and maybe he doesn't realize that, and maybe he'll find that out this week. Yeah. But his spot in this lineup is not guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think at the time when they acquired him, I don't know if we necessarily knew that JGP and Clutterbuck were as close as they were to coming back, which is interesting. But yeah, I think you throw him into that mix too, as far as a guy who might come out. And I wanted to ask you before we go to break to bring Joe on. Lane Lambert was asked about it when he was benched a couple of times. He didn't see the ice in a couple of third periods, and his answer was because he doesn't really know the system yet. Do you think that was a nice way?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, it is technically true that he doesn't know the system yet, but that is an easier way of letting him off the hook.
All right, fair enough.
I'll say it. This will be the third and final time. Remind me, I say this year. Anytime you want to see what a coach thinks of a player, look at his ice time and nothing else.
All right, fair enough. Well, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in here live at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY, and of course, your favorite podcast providers later on. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Joe Buono of Isles Fix will be joining us to talk about his brand new book. We'll be right back.
I don't want to hear it. It's over. I can't believe they fell short again.
Yeah, but they played so well. They made it to the semifinals 2 years in a row.
The semifinals aren't the cup. God damn it, I hate those Lightning.
They'll get another shot at it next year.
I don't even want to talk about it anymore, all right? They lost, okay? Let me just sit here and enjoy the one thing that makes me a little bit happy. This fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty, turkey-filled Blue Line combo. I eat 3 every day to help keep me strong.
Hey, Donnie, can I have one of those?
Coming right up. Talk about a blast from the Blue Line.
Blue Line Deli and Bagels. Our goal is to make you a hero.
Miss the days of mixtapes and arcades? Love the taste of a bold IPA or maybe an ice-cold lager? There's a place where all of those magical things come together. Lost Farmer Brewing Company. At 63A East 2nd Street in the heart of Mineola, Lost Farmer combines a love of the 80s and a passion for quality beer to create brews that can only be described as gnarly, radical, and totally tubular. The retro vibe of the tasting bar will amp up your nostalgia while the blend of both local and exotic ingredients amp up your taste buds. Beer not your thing? Crack open a can of cider or sip a Chardonnay on the extended patio. Order up from the snack menu. You can even bring your own. If you're more of a homebody, pick up a growler to go or order online at lostfarmerbrewing.com. And for all of Long Island's hockey fans, Lost Farmer created the delicious Stable Shaker American Lager to celebrate the newly built UBS Arena at Belmont Park. Whether you're at the stable for a hockey game, concert, or a comedy show, you can find Stable Shaker by can and draft around the arena. So raise a cup to the next cup with Lost Farmer Brewery, the future of Long Island craft beer.
Thanks for giving some time to our sponsors. Ready to talk more Isles? The train rolls on right here on Hockey Night in New York.
That's right, folks. The train rolls on right here at Hockey Night in New York, live from Florida Media in Rockville Center. And joining us right now, the founder of the Isles Fix newsletter, Mr. Joe Buono. Joe, pleasure having you in the studio, man. How you doing?
This place is awesome, guys, and that's before I knew that the Mortal Kombat arcade game was here in the studios, too. Congratulations on this success. It's awesome.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll get a game in after the show's over.
I'm not very good at video games.
Well, look, we're very excited to have you here to talk about your brand new children's book, New York Islanders A to Z. Phenomenal job. Being at the children's level, it was a good read for me. It was pretty appropriate, so I was able to get through it. But it was fantastic, and just some great notes on that. Obviously written by yourself and illustrated by Joe Morasic, who does a great job. He's always posting his artwork on Twitter. I follow him. He does a fantastic job, and it was a great collaboration between the two of you. And then you bring some heavy hitters on board. You get the stat checks by Eric Hornick, who does a phenomenal job, obviously. The pregame by Brendan Burke. The first intermission by Stan Fischler. The second intermission by Chris King, radio voice of the New York Islanders. And the postgame by the great legendary Jiggs McDonald. So we'll start off with the easy one right off the bat here. What inspired you to write the book, and when did the process start?
Well, my first thoughts about writing a book came about 10 years ago, actually, 2013, 2014. I just started to think about how parents connect with their children in different ways, and sports being one of them. And could there be a way that they can introduce their favorite sports teams and their favorite games that they remember, at a very early age? Had some ideas that are still on a Microsoft Word document that maybe I can execute on, but wasn't able to. Then I had my daughter in 2018, my wife and I, and when you have a kid, you get inundated with a lot of children's books around you.
Sure.
And I started thinking about it again, and A to Z was really simple conceptually, and I thought I can execute it this time around because of everything I've always done around the Islanders over the last 7-8 years with podcasting and the Twitter profile and some of the connections I had. So I said, let's go for this. Now, the first thing I needed, of course, was an illustrator.
Right.
And the real star of the book is Joe Morasic, the illustrator. And had a conversation with him, and he, too, wanted to do something like this for a long time. And to find a talented illustrator, number one, was great, but to find someone who is passionate about the subject, who's also a diehard Islander fan, was great as well. And that was a perfect match, and we started thinking about who would go where, and he started sketching.
Fantastic. So just rattled off a bunch of phenomenal names that you got involved in the book. So I guess two-part question here. How did you approach the Islanders and get them on board? And then also Eric Hornick, Brendan Burke, Stan Fischler, Chris King, Jiggs McDonald.
Right. So I didn't approach the Islanders right away. We started doing things, and then after a while I started to think to myself, there's this thing called intellectual property that we may want to check in on, know?
Sure. It's important.
And so we ended up talking to Nick Pizzatello, who's the executive vice president with New York Hockey Holdings. Someone had recommended he be a really good ear to listen and pitch this idea to. And and obviously everyone has seen the way the fan base is embraced by the organization and the current ownership.
Yes,
from
absolutely.
A creative standpoint over the last several years. And they were good to go with it, provided that a portion of the proceeds went to the Islanders Children's Foundation and that they got final sign-off, which we were comfortable with and certainly okay with. So, we started, A for Arbor, B for Bossy. That stuff was kind of easy, and then we had to get a little bit creative for some of the other letters.
When I saw it, I got the book yesterday, and I've read it 4 times at least. I sent it. Great job, by the way. Phenomenal job by you and John. And I kept on thinking, the A to Z thing is good, but it could also be limiting in a way. But then it turns out like you really covered everyone. Like to me, I would have to think really long and hard about maybe who didn't make the book. But were there people that just fell just short of the cutting room floor, or even maybe if there's a player who was really close to your heart that just didn't make it, but you found creative ways, like Q is born right. For Quick. So
there are other drawings that Joe has that did not make it, and one of them was. Start with Q was Alan Quine. So when we first started thinking about who was Q, and you go on and look at the Islanders' historical database as to what surnames begin with Q, and I was like, this could work because I can loop in how they won the 2015-16 playoff series for the first time. He scored a double overtime goal against the Panthers in Game 5. It's not perfect, but it works. But then as the book kind of came together overall, he just stuck out. Nothing against Alan Quine, but it just did not fit. And then as I kind of finished it overall, I was saying, you know what? The Islanders Hall of Fame, and again, this started in 2018. We didn't publish it until 2022. The Islanders Hall of Fame, for a long time, as people that are watching this know, was a banner hanging from the rafters that people really didn't pay close attention to.
Yep.
But when UBS Arena came out, it's now very prominent, and they're making a very big deal of it.
Right.
So then it was, we need to get everyone who's on that, has a plaque, needs to be in this book. And that changed things a little bit. You mentioned Q for Quick, but then we also had to make sure that Patrick Flatley was in there. And that's why he's, C for captain.
That was really good. And with Janssen gets in there, you got Ziggy, you cover the areas too. Also, big respect for, finding a spot for Shannon, for Eric Hornick, for Paul Cartier, the organist. Was there a player, though, or if you're comfortable sharing that, just like, by the way, is Barzal in it, for example?
We had talked about having Barzal in it.
I think he was the original one that came to mind that I said if anyone might be.
So the original C was Calder Trophy, and that's how we were going to get Barzal in there. And then as we started talking about it and also talking with the team, it's not maybe the smartest thing to have a lot of active players in the book because things change so frequently. And again, this took several years. Now we're all glad that Barzal signed his contract extension and is hopefully there for 9 years.
Right.
But things can change rather quickly. So at the end of the day, Anders Lee is the only active player in the book, and that's because he is the captain of the team. But yeah, we had that conversation. Originally there were going to be more active players in there than certainly the final version.
Great idea, great notion, smart, and I'll tell you why. I wrote it's now the 50th anniversary. I wrote the 25th anniversary book with Stan Fischler, and I wish we were that smart then. And there's easy Millbury jokes that we could all make or whatever. But it's funny to think that in the last chapter that I'm pretty sure I wrote by myself, Stan did some of the other errors by himself. All of a sudden, we have this thing about Bertuzzi and McCabe in the new era, and it just sits there like a blob now, right? To just so that's a good call. Yeah, by the way, you could always do a second edition. Right?
Exactly, and I know Joe Morasek at different times, depending on how inspired he was, has talked about, we'll get them in on the second run of this. I kind of skipped over a part you asked around how did they get Brendan involved. I just want to go into that.
Yeah.
Brendan was the first person I thought of because similar age and also similar part of his life with having young kids.
Sure.
So conceptually, I said this might appeal to him. And when he said yes, that obviously gave us such credibility and then gave me a little bit more of courage to say, okay, let me start thinking even bigger.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, what if he had the pregame and we could get Jiggs McDonald to do the postgame? I had Jiggs on the podcast a few times. Anyone that's met Jiggs, the nicest man ever. And I called him at his Florida home, and he picked up and he said, it would be my honor to do. And just how many words, and he got his in. And then I got even greedier and said, well, first and second intermission. Emailed Stan. And how many words? 500 words. Okay. 3 hours later. Here you go. Good luck with the book. And that's what Stan did. Nice. And then Chris King's submission was really key because we had a real difficulty of trying to get Butch in the book because of B for Bossy, G for Gillies. Maybe we would have went the Conn Smythe route, but that would have then been difficult with not finding a place for Patrick Flatley. So when I talked to Chris, it was about, could you do this and could you write this about Butch? And he right away started talking about the relationship they've had being around the rink with each other for so many years. And he wrote a tremendous tribute. So Butch went from, hey, can we get him in, to probably having the most words written about him out of anyone in the book.
Nice.
That's fantastic. So you talked about the Islanders Hall of Fame, that was kind of a criteria for you to get those guys in there. Was there any sort of, like, you come to a certain letter and maybe you have too many options or, of course, not enough, but you were like, okay, what kind of boxes do we have to check here to make to decide who's going to take this letter or that letter?
Sure. So I think the most candidates for a letter was T. So we had
Makes
Bill
sense.
Torrey. You have John Tonelli. You had someone else that, depending on your feelings around the franchise, he may or may not should have been in the book.
John, yes.
So we had to come up with what to do there. And we also had Brian Trottier. So we ended up using D for Dynasty to talk about Bill Torrey as the architect of the dynasty. It also allowed us, at least in written form, to reference everyone that was on all 4 Stanley Cups in the book. And then we were able to use trophy winners to get Trottier in there. So he's there for Hart Trophy, which worked out really well. And then that also helped us with V as well. We used Vezina Trophy for Billy Smith.
Nice.
Which, again, one Vezina Trophy in team history, one Hart Trophy in team history, and that worked out really well for us. And then that allowed us to get the Sutter brothers in there, both Brent and Dwayne, which, people don't think about them. They're a little bit of an afterthought, but what great stories around them. I mean, Dwayne came up and won 4 Stanley Cups right away, and then obviously his brother comes on for the ride, and Brent's the captain of the team and takes after, Dennis Potvin. So.
And speaking of captains, I learned a couple of new things reading this book, and one of which was that, assuming all goes the way it's supposed to, Anders Lee will be the longest tenured captain next year since Dennis Potvin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at everybody I had listed, and I was like, wow, 1 year, 2 years,
when
3 years.
Patrick Flatley, I think, wasn't the captain anymore, he was the longest tenured forward, I think, at that point, is the way they kind of talk about him. And yeah, Anders is on his way of, breaking that. So yeah, I think for people are like, well, what's the age group for this? Because there's a lot more material in here than I think people originally think when they hear A to Z book.
Right.
But I think you can look at the photos and like the rhymes that we have underneath and get really playful. The rhymes, by the way, took me the longest time, and probably the most editorial changes were about the rhymes.
That's funny.
Like Ziggy Palffy, no Islander was better wearing the fisherman's sweater. Like, I'm more proud of that than anything else.
I was just going to ask you that. Was there a particular, I guess there's a particular thing is the rhyming, but was there a particular letter, I guess, or individual or whatever it was that stood out to you, like, man, that's my favorite, that was my best work, or that you were most proud of?
Wow.
Putting you on the spot.
I tell you what, I really like the way like UBS Arena came out. Mm-hmm. Now, that one, again, a late entry.
Yeah.
We had U for uniforms originally, and we moved that over to jerseys to get kind of all the different third jerseys and alternative jerseys, talk about the history of the logo that way as well. And obviously, I think the Islanders were happy that we put UBS Arena in there. By the way, Joe Morasic, he's put it out there on Twitter, did a time lapse of how he drew that, because that one took the longest by far. And Corey Wright included it in our article that was on NewYorkIslanders.com. But that's like a tough one. Like, how do you write about an arena? But when I read that one over, it really captures kind of how special and unique that building is and how important it is. And if you haven't been there recently as a fan, I was there for the first ever game when they're just starting to kind of feel things out. And then I finally got back there a couple weeks ago where it's kind of now churning as it's supposed to be. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
We're so incredibly spoiled now to have that place. So it worked out. I'm so happy that it's in there.
And the dominoes that had to fall to make it happen is just unbelievable. Now they play in a palace, and we didn't know if they were going to be here at all, which is phenomenal. So most importantly, where can everybody find the book? How can they get it?
Sure. So the book's published through BookBaby. It could be self-published it. So you can go to store.bookbaby.com and search New York Islanders, and it'll come right up. But also go at Isles Fix on Twitter, and you'll find our link in our profile. And our pinned tweet is one of my Substacks, which kind of talks about how the book came about and what our inspiration was for it. So you can find the link there as well. And again, a portion of the proceeds goes to the Islanders Children's Foundation. Can't thank the Islanders enough about the marketing power around it. We're talking about whether or not we can either have a table set up for a future home game to do some selling, and maybe it'll be an Isles Lab one day. Make sure it's an affordable item at Isles Lab.
Yeah.
won't be $75.
Put it right next to those $90 jackets, those $900 jackets. All right, so before we go to break, why don't we talk a little bit of Islanders here?
Please. Yeah.
And you were sitting over there on the side there while Chris and I was talking. So what do you make of this team now in this stretch run, in this playoff chase? We talked about the teams that are involved, Washington maybe getting in there a little bit now after the win last night. What do you make of this team under Lane Lambert, and how's it all going to end? Tell us. Give us the crystal ball.
What a strange year. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's because we haven't had a normal 82-game season in a while, but it feels like there's been 5 or 6 iterations of who the Islanders are this year. And, Chris mentioned the word identity before, but what is their identity? And I think for Barry Trotz, for those 3 years, it was clear what their identity was. And even if you weren't a fan of the Islanders or not even a hockey fan, you could explain in 1 or 2 sentences, well, this is the style this team plays.
Right.
And they've had multiple iterations of different types of styles and different ways to win. Now, to me, a little bit, everything here over the next 14 games feels a little bit like gravy, because I didn't say I completely wrote them off, but when the Barzal injury got announced on that Monday, I was basically saying the next few games are going to give them clarity that they should be sellers at the deadline. And that's okay, because they've already extended Bo Horvat. So they're in a better position next year moving forward.
Sure.
But the fact that they went, 5-1-1, 6-1-1 without him completely changed now the whole thought process around how the season can go the rest of the way. And, it's also weird in that Islander fans for so long did not know what playoff success was for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So when you were at the 2013 team and they made the playoffs, that meant everything to be at that Nassau Coliseum for Game 3, regardless of how the series went.
Right.
But now they've tasted playoff success to where, are you going to be okay with losing in 5 games to the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, the mentality has
as
changed.
A fan base, if they just make the playoffs, you're going to be like, well, I'm happy they did. It's very different than those 07 or 03 or 04 teams where they made it and they were going to be outclassed by a top seed and you kind of expected it. It's a very odd feeling right now to be like, well, where should my expectation level be around this franchise? What should be a season I should be proud of and a result I should be proud of?
It's a great point to make, and you're absolutely right. Around the trade deadline leading up to it, there was a lot of people just even saying on Twitter, sell. Doesn't matter. Why play Boston and get, dumped in 5 games or whatever it is. But it's nice to see that the bar has been raised, right? And I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that question, because you can make a good argument for, not running into that bus that's potentially heading your way. And, we talk so often about how empty the cupboard is as far as prospects go and young players up and coming, where they probably could have helped themselves by getting a couple of draft picks.
But what choice do they have at this point? They've clearly are going for it this year, next year, etc. Lou's okay with moving these first-round picks, provided it's a player that he can retain and keep in the fold, which he's done to his credit each and every time he's made that move. So you just don't know how to feel about it. I don't want to see. I know this maybe may want to talk more X's and O's, but I always go about kind of like, how do I feel about the team and the expectations and where they should be right now? And it's weird because they kind of have this underdog feel now that Barzal and Pageau is out, where you're going to be super excited and proud of them if they make it to the playoffs. But then reality is, if they get knocked out in the first round, given where expectations were a couple of years ago, and then how do you look forward? It's an interesting, they're in a very odd spot as a fan base, as a franchise. They
are, and as Chris was saying prior, I mean, this narrative is going to change every night. You're going to have different teams winning. There's going to be surprise wins and losses. There's going to be teams that you maybe think are out of it or back in it, and the Islanders are, I don't want to say a comfortable place, but they're in the best place they've been in a while, just at least sitting in this wild card spot. But at the very least, regardless of what happens later, it's a lot of fun to watch, and hopefully,
right. I mean, it's enjoy the playoff push, even though some nights the math is going to look in your favor and the scoreboard is going to play in your favor, and then there are going to be nights like today where you're watching a Ranger game, rooting for them, and they let you down again, and then you start doing the calculations in your head, and you're going to go from thinking, we're going to lose to Pittsburgh, and I'm okay with losing to Pittsburgh because they've played so well,
right?
And then they stun you, and then you're like, well, now we're going to go and take care of Washington, and we're going to knock them out and put them aside, and then that doesn't happen.
Yes, and there's a note I actually want to make.
You're going all over the place.
The one thing you talk about the identity of this team, we're going to break soon, is that I've noted, like, they haven't had longer than a 6-game winning streak this season, and it almost seems inevitable since the beginning of the season till now, where like they'll get that if and when they get a little hot, they start playing better. A game like last night always seems to just be inevitable, where it's going to stop that streak in its tracks. Like, they just haven't found enough, winning pedigree this year to kind of just keep that train rolling. And for whatever reason, they kind of get in their own way. A lot of talk about missing defensive assignments and stuff like that. But, like, they just haven't had that team that could just churn out, either win after win or point after point. And I think that's what's kind of set the more humble success this season, apart from, what you saw under Barry Trotz, and that's kind of where they're at.
I mean, they had incredible streaks under Barry Trotz those few years, and then still stumbled, like you said, at the opening, where they were backing in to the playoffs. They finished 4th out of the 4 teams that made it a couple of years ago. They, points percentage-wise, were in or out, depending on how you feel about that at the pause. But yeah, like, they haven't been able to string off 6, 7, 8 wins in a row, and you always said, well, every team does that. Even mediocre teams do that at some point. Is this last stretch the best that we're going to see? Or they have one more, do they get Pageau back? Do they get Barzal back? And they have one more kind of level to hit at the opportune time. And then we'll be here, in 3 weeks saying, they're a tough out for those Boston Bruins. They better watch out. The Islanders have been playing playoff hockey now for 2 months.
That's what we're crossing our fingers for. But Chris, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Main Street Board Game Cafe, and then we'll take a little break.
You got a Main Street Board Game Cafe in Huntington Village on Long Island's North Shore. Games for sale and for open play. Food and drink, beer and wine, fun and friends. Bring the magic of phones down, eyes up, tabletop board games to your family. Our staff will help you find the right game from old favorites to the hottest new releases. We have everything from strategic to easy party games. Get off your screens and unplug your games for a night your family will remember. Looking for meetups to join? Our Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, or Game Night Live communities are welcoming for all. We also do parties and corporate events. Located at 307 Main Street in Huntington Village. Go to mainstboardgamecafe.com for more information. Main Street Board Game Cafe. Find your crowd, unplug your game.
Unplug your game. And folks, once again, I want to thank you all for tuning in live here at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY. Going to take a quick break, and then the train rolls on. We'll be right back.
New York Islanders fans, Sunday night is hockey night in New York. Whether you were raised at the barn in Uniondale or born in the stable at Belmont, tune in to Hockey Night in New York. Catch us live from Floored Media in Rockville Center, Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, as we cover all things Islanders at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY. All episodes are also available on YouTube and all your favorite podcast providers. And for all you social butterflies, you can follow at HockeyNightNY on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for all the latest updates. Hockey Night in New York, the best night of the week for any Islanders fan.
And now, it's time for What's on Tap, a look ahead at the Islanders' upcoming schedule.
That's right, folks. It is time for What's on Tap. And the New York Islanders are venturing west out to play the California teams. Starting Tuesday, they are going into Los Angeles, who are playing quite well this season. That is going to be a tough game, as Chris mentioned earlier in the show. Then a back-to-back stint against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or they're not so mighty anymore, just the Anaheim Ducks. And then Saturday, they go into San Jose to play the Sharks, another team that the Islanders should probably beat. But you got to do it on the ice. So, gentlemen, what do you make of this upcoming schedule?
The same as it's been all season. They'll win a game, in this case the LA game that we don't expect them to, and then
right.
They'll absolutely crap the bed one of the two nights against the in the winnable game. I wouldn't expect anything less. I expect and again, bare minimum 4-point week, and really they need to take all 6 if they want to get some distance here.
I agree, Joe. You look at these opponents coming up, and you have a tough LA team who, they were kind of one of the powers in the West, a couple years back, right? And you see a divergence between LA and Chicago, right? Both kind of like they win they're 2-3 Stanley Cups each. Chicago takes a completely different direction here. LA, a strong team, they're building with some youth here. They got some good players there, and then of course you have teams that are kind of in a rebuild in Anaheim and San Jose trying to figure it out. So you look at these teams coming up. What do you make of it?
I just hope it goes better than the Western Canada trip from earlier in the year. Although if you were a fan of sleep, it was very helpful for the games to be over after the first period. And LA, we get on the Islanders, some people, about the 7:30 starts, but the 10:30 start is brutal. I really want that 10 o'clock start on these games. But I think, what Chris said too, that first game is going to make you feel again, it's going to get your emotions up or down. You're going to either feel like, okay, they're back on it, they had a blip, and now you're going to look ahead and say they're going to get all 6 points on this West Coast road trip, or else you're going to go, now they had 2 bad periods against Pittsburgh. They were lucky to pull that one out, a stinker at home against the Capitals, and now they have 2 must-wins against teams that have nothing to play for. Your emotions are going to be all over, hinging on how that LA game goes. I think you want at least a point, hopefully, in that game. They played, the other bad game that they've had during the stretch was that game at home against LA, where LA went out to the 3-0 lead. Islanders got 2 goals in the third period, 1 late, kind of came on, but it was a similar type of game. Could not get pucks on net. Yeah. They blocked a ton of shots. They gave a ton of credit to that team's structure in that game. Yeah. So whether or not they learned anything from that game and have a little bit of a different, game plan to attack that, I think we'll probably find out within the first 20 minutes.
No, I think that's great stuff, and you wonder if J.G. Pageau is going to slot in here on Tuesday. He traveled to Pittsburgh, obviously didn't get into the lineup, But maybe he gets in there, and then of course we play the guessing game that we talked about before, wondering who's going to come out to make room for him. But he's a guy that they could really use, especially because Bo Horvat's done such a phenomenal job wearing all these hats that he's been wearing.
If you just win faceoffs and don't score another goal, I might be happy at this point. I just get
right.
He won another one. He won another
luxury,
one.
Yep.
And people go, oh, look at Anthony Beauvillier, and good for Beauvillier and what he's doing on a very talented line. But you were getting Bo Horvat to be a scorer, but I don't think, which happens in every sport, until you watch the player every single night, you got an appreciation for all the things they do well. And without Barzal, he's turned the intangible side of his game up even further than being the guy who's just going to score, especially when playing on 5-on-5. So yeah, I'm thrilled that he's going to be part of this team moving forward.
He ended up being so much more critical to this team in such a short span of time than I think any of us expected. Like you said, you don't know until you watch him night in, night out. But it'll be nice to maybe take a little bit of those responsibilities away from pass him along to JG. Maybe Bo Horvat sits a couple extra seconds on the bench so that he's fresh for the power play.
Matt Barzal may never take another face-off again.
No,
and he'll be happy about it.
That's finished. We can throw that 37% away or whatever it is. But that's going to do it for What's on Tap. So, Ed, why don't we get into Hero of the Week?
And now, it's time for What's on Tap. A look ahead at the Islanders' upcoming schedule.
That's all right, bud. Just hit the other button. There we go, folks. When you hear this song, it is time for Hero of the Week, brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels Half Price Hero, which this week is the Poke Check, featuring roast beef, turkey, ham, Swiss and American, lettuce and tomato, mayo on a hero. Stop on in to the Blue Line Deli and Bagels Huntington location, mention Hockey Night New York, and get half off the Poke Check. So, Mr. Chris Botta, I am going to start with you. Who is your hero of the week?
I know this is probably a non-traditional one, and not everybody will love it, but my pick, when you asked me earlier today, was no hesitation. That was head coach Lane Lambert.
All right.
The reason why I say that is because, it's easy to pick on a guy, rip on a guy when the team's struggling, and I know they're coming off a bad loss on Saturday, but for this season, he's made it through. He got to this point where they are in the race. He kept his job. And yeah, I do think that was somewhat in question. A lot of people were saying, and people will say if they somehow don't make the playoffs this year, that he might not be back. But he's always been a guy to root for. You like to see that person who's been in this game, who's given so much of the game and works hard to succeed, and he's there. And where I decided to give him the hero, again, this might be very strange, but this is my thing, was watching his post game last night. It was the first time that I saw this season after a loss in a post-game press conference where he looked comfortable, where he looked confident. That not to say that he looked like super uncomfortable prior to that, but he always seemed defensive.
Okay.
We should have won. He just looked like a guy who's now in the job because he got the wins prior to this. This is, in his eyes, probably an outlier. He's focused on the next game Tuesday. Both teams are going to be well prepared. LA doesn't play between now and Tuesday as well. And I just, I watched him in that post game take the questions, and I just thought, that's a guy who knows he's here for the rest of the season, who's done all he could to get this team in the position that it's in. And to that, I say, good job.
I think that's a great selection, and I'm going to go another way, more traditional, on the ice, and that's the guy who I wanted to talk about earlier in the show. That's Hudson Fasching. He gets the winning goal.
He's so your guy.
He is my guy.
He
is. He's my Kuhlman. He's my Franz Nielsen, absolutely.
And you hear you might have a drink soon. You hear about this?
No, tell us more.
Apparently there's an up-and-coming worker at the new Offside Tavern that has made a suggestion to Nick Costa that they have the Old Fasching.
I think that's pretty brilliant. Good. Yeah, Old Fasching. I'll be ordering plenty of those when they open up. But look, he gets the game-winning goal again in non-traditional fashion, but it doesn't matter. It goes off his shin. It doesn't matter as long as it counts. And look, that's the rule says it's got to go off the skate. But beyond that, he's been playing fantastic. He's been gelling with Casey Cizikas in an excellent way. They're both playing very well together. Just playing that grinded out, greasy, lunch pail style, playing very good hockey, and a pleasant surprise to all of us because I didn't know who the hell the guy was.
I loved his quote. Andrew Gross did an article this week on him, and he had this quote where he said, basically, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this again and have another shot. I'm just going to fake that I'm confident and see what happens.
Right.
And he's looked confident since he got here.
It's just funny to hear you say that. I didn't see that piece by Andrew, but I did say a few weeks ago on the show that if you're Hudson Fasching, you got to start acting like you belong here. And I think that's what's happening here, so that's good.
Yeah, no doubt. Not only to keep a spot on the roster, but also to earn himself a contract next summer because he's an unrestricted free agent this summer. And I think that's a guy that they have to seriously look at. Again, we don't know if Engvall is going to be a guy who gets re-signed, but he's 26. He's got speed. That's something you might want to be injecting into this lineup because we all kind of know. Fantastic. I mean, very handsome man. But, you look at the fact that you talk about how this has been an aging team now for a little while. You got guys getting up there in age, whether you're mentioning Anders Lee, Cal Clutterbuck, Casey Cizikas. They're all on the wrong side of 30. And Hudson Fasching could be another guy who, again, he's a bottom six guy. He's never going to be a goal scorer on the top two lines, but he's a way to get this team a little bit younger, especially without all those draft picks that we've been talking about. So the winning goal against the Sabres, he gets the 3-2 goal against the Penguins, clicking great with Casey Cizikas. So Hudson Fasching is my hero of the week. Joe, did you want to chime in with anybody else? Or
I'll go off the ice.
Please.
My hero of the ice is whoever is working on the Islanders marketing department, whatever department's in charge of getting Shakira at UBS Arena last night.
Sure.
I mean,
with Carson Daly.
Shakira, Carson Daly, and MJF, if you're a wrestling fan, the AEW champion, we're all there on a Saturday night in Elmont, New York.
Yeah.
This franchise wants to be big time because you would go to games even at Barclays Center and it'd be like, here is, the backup point guard for the Nets is there tonight, right? Or here's the, or even they had the Giants, offensive line, and it's like the backup offensive linemen who are on the practice squad. These are big-time celebrities that they're trying to bring in that would rival the type of people that you would see at Madison Square Garden. And Chris might be able to comment more about that than I am, but that stuff is a big deal, I know, probably to the business side of things. It doesn't mean they don't care a lot about the hockey stuff on ice, but that one blew me away, that Shakira was there.
Hips don't lie.
Yeah, very good.
Checks.
The part of the... all of it, if not part of it, is from ownership and arena management. So the as much as I think Islander fans, and I appreciate this too, like to be like the little engine that could and the team in the suburbs or whatever, whether they like it or not, they're big time now. Whether they like it or not, they're in bed with billionaires, with powerful people like the Oakview Group that manages this building, like people like Irving Azoff and Tim Leiweke. And when you have that, when Leiweke says before the first game ever at UBS that he was so proud of getting Harry Styles to do one date at UBS, this all kind of comes around. So it's great. I'll always have a soft spot, especially for the people who are like true fans, celebrity fans.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't think anybody's under any illusion that Shakira can name two Islanders.
Hudson Fasching, because he's the hero of the week.
Of course, be one of them. And but no, this is part of being big time, and that's good.
Yeah, and she wore a wonderful hat. Did you see that?
From the Isles Lab, I'm sure.
It cost about $8,000.
And as reported by John Wall Street, which is a great name for a sports business reporter, earlier this week, I gave some legs to, and other people did as well. They're in the top 5 now in merchandising.
Right.
That's right.
And we have fun with some of the prices that are on there, but they talk about how it's not necessarily about having to sell those items. It's about going into that store as a season ticket holder every time and seeing something new. Yeah. And it's part of the overall experience. And again, I was there for the first time. I live in Connecticut now. It's hard to get out there. I was there for the first time a couple weeks ago since the first night, and it was a completely different experience, a well-oiled machine that organization and building is. I could not be pressed enough. And if you're paying the type of prices that you are for your seats, for your food, and everything else, if Shakira can be there and you can put that on your social media, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Well, excellent choice there. So there's your that'll
do it. It's a new one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A little off the beaten path here, but that'll do it for Hero of the Week. Real quick before we get into questions, Bruin, just want to mention 2 guys that I brought up before, kind of that veteran leadership of this team that stepped up. One guy the entire season, but both of them, during this little stretch here during these last 4 games. Brock Nelson and Anders Lee. Lee has the 2 goals against Pittsburgh, 2 goals goals against the Wings. He's stepping up here with Matt Barzal being out. And Brock Nelson's just pretty much through and through been phenomenal all season. What is he? I'm trying to look at the numbers here. 18 points in his last 22 games played. I mean, these guys have pretty much been carrying the banner for this team with Matt Barzal being out, and when he was in the lineup.
I mean, Anders Lee, everyone talks about the 7-year contract like it's this big albatross of a contract. Every year so far, he's given you exactly what you would have expected or hoped Anders Lee would give you in terms of goal scoring, net presence, etc. He lost, obviously, that season and that run to the ACL injury. But you're like, okay, well, at what point is it going to go down? I don't know yet. Is he 31, 32 years old?
Right.
Every year, 20, 25, potential 30 goals, same type of goals that he's scoring every single time, just like he has throughout his whole career. And Brock, you forget, he went a 14-game stretch this year with no goals.
Right.
He was on a 40-goal clip. Maybe he gets really hot over the last 14. All-star game, accuracy competition champion.
Yeah, right.
Gray hair in there now.
Sure,
it's awesome to see.
Yeah, no question. Chris, anything to add?
Sounds like a guy who does a newsletter every day.
Right?
Like,
he kind of knows his stuff
he's
over here. Yeah.
He's not A to Z. He's also the encyclopedia for the Islanders, and well said.
Yeah.
Nothing. I don't know. Damn thing I could add.
I have to read. A lot of people do. I have to read the Skinny every day.
Eric Hornick, man.
Yes.
I refreshed that. I'm like, what's taking him so long to put it out? The game ended 15 minutes ago. Come on,
it's
Eric.
1:30 in the morning. Where is it? No, he does it great. I've been reading that thing probably since he first started. He just does a great job.
He's another unsung. I mean, he stat checked my book. Thank you so much for that, Eric, because I was very nervous I was going to make a mistake. He did find one with Anders Lee. Wikipedia has him at a different draft position than Eric. Eric sniffed that out for me, which saved me some embarrassment. But we're blessed to have Eric. Like the Islanders broadcast is phenomenal, but the amount of stuff that he feeds, Brendan during the game, in game, etc.
He makes my job here much easier. I know exactly where to go if I'm looking. I mean, the stats that I just pulled out on Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, Eric Hornick, right there. So that's going to do it for that segment there. We're going to go into Questions Brewing. Ed, Jay, how we doing over there?
It's time
doing
for
good.
Questions Brewing.
Doing
Brought to
good.
you by Lost Farmer Brewing Company.
There's never been a time where he's surprised when you ask him that. Like, okay.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Doing good. Yeah.
Good to see you guys are doing all
What are
right.
the quality questions for tonight?
We have
The
some good ones
questions
here.
that are brewing.
Yes, they've brewed, continue to brew as
Speaking of
always.
brew.
Yeah. Why don't you shout it out?
Yeah.
Open up a Lost
open this
Farmer.
little stable shaker, courtesy of Lost Farmer. So,
Wow. Look
Ed,
at
what do
that.
you got, bud?
Wow. First question from Dauber Nobson. Love that name.
Nice. Nice. Very creative.
Dauber, what?
Nobson, like Noah Dobson, basically. So Dauber Nobson.
Fire away.
Could have gone a different route there. Okay, good.
If you could take attributes of current Islanders to build an ideal bottom six forward, what would you use? For example, Pageau's versatility, Casey's motor, etc.
I think you just picked the two perfect guys right there to combine, right? You get the tenacity of Casey Cizikas, the face-off prowess of J.G. Pageau, and he has a little bit more of a scoring prowess than Casey Cizikas. I think if you were able to put those guys into a mold together, I think that's probably your perfect bottom six guy. If you guys
I'll have one more. Zach Parise's cap hit.
Yes, well said. And well, you know what, Casey? They all bring it every night. But, I mean, I've been saying this all season, and since he joined the team last year, Zach Parise puts it all out there.
Is he going to come back
Every
for another $750K?
Why not? I say why not?
They said they were talking about like a 2-year extension at the last year when he signed the one, and now you wish he had almost.
If he's still got the wheels, I mean, he's a great piece down there.
Yeah, I think the decision to go to one was probably just his, and he figured for family reasons or whatever, made it plenty of money. I could make this decision a year at a time.
Yeah, and he's a guy who, if I want to see anybody get into the playoffs with the New York Islanders, it's Zach Parise, right? Like coming back, the family lines and everything, and you can tell how much he wants it with this team, right? He's playing for the team his father played for, and I'd love to see him, regardless of whether you play in the Bruins in the first round or not. I just want to see Zach Parise playing Islander playoff hockey.
I also like that everything that he says in the post game, because you hear about players, we're focused in on only what we're doing.
Yeah.
One game at a time. What's ahead of us can only control what we can control. Listen to his post game comments. He always knows how many games in hand the other opponents have.
Sure, yeah.
He knows what their upcoming schedules are. He's in tune and locked in on what's going on as much as anyone, at least admits it when he's talking publicly to the cameras.
He also pointed out in the post game that it could be an advantage, even though the Islanders have these games in hand, that they're playing teams that are now playing more games in less amount of time.
Yes.
And I do think that helped them against Buffalo, for example.
No doubt about it. Ed, what else you got, buddy?
Mr. Tom Boyle.
T-Boyle.
Yeah. With Varley likely gone, does Gustafsson make sense to back up Sorokin? He's an RFA this season coming off his ELC.
I disagree with Tom. I don't think that
we don't know. We can't say
Varlamov
he's
is likely gone at all.
Yeah.
In fact,
gone yet.
if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I think Varley's back next year. I think he comes back to back up Sorokin on a smaller contract. We've talked about that on the show before.
What's their combined cap hit this year, the two of them? Around $9 million?
$9 million. I think it's 5 and 4.
Right. So if he comes back, he knows he's coming back at a discount. So
100%.
you could have a cheaper year next year as far as your goalie tandem is going into the season.
Yeah.
And then you go with to whatever that Ilya Sorokin extension may be.
Right.
But maybe you're able to still keep him in the fold for a little bit longer and still have that overall cap hit at around $9 or $10 million, because he was adamant. You don't see players that often. Listen, he was asked a question. He could have, said no comment or kind of
Right.
not answered it.
Or we'll see what
that
happens.
He wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be here. He's expressed that he wants to be here, and he wants to be here in the future.
And he knows what his role will be. He knows that Ilya Sorokin is the starter
It's
of
his
this
role
team.
that it is right now.
So exactly. So he doesn't seem to have any dreams of getting picked up by a team out west that needs a starter.
And the Islanders don't
he's
have.
good. He's cool.
Tristan Lennox, they signed to a 3-year entry-level contract. He's had an impressive season in the OHL. But, Jacob Skarek and Corey Schneider, they don't have. If they had a young prospect that can come up at no money and be the backup, I think it's a different scenario. They don't have that right now. So you're going to pay some goalie something.
Yeah.
Why not have it be Varley?
Yeah, and he's buddies with Sorokin. It all just makes sense to me. So T-Boyle, love you. You tune in every week, but got to disagree. Varley's. I think Varley's going to be the backup next year. Next one.
I agree. This is from DTMR. Arena edition again. Why no out-of-town scoreboard?
Is that true?
Yeah, so that's definitely a thing, and that's definitely a Lou thing. That I know. For a fact, we were asked last week about them not announcing how many goals a player has. So, Horvat, if he scores his next goal, I think would be his 37th or something like that. But the Islander PA announcer does not say that. We speculated last week that was also a Lou Lamoriello thing.
Yeah.
I said that if that was true, that it was a Lou Lamoriello thing, it'd just be really petty and ridiculous for him to do that. And I continue to believe, I'll just leave it at this, that I continue to believe that it is a Lou thing. As for the scoreboard, that's been something that he's been doing for years, and it's silly, but I actually find the goal stuff worse, because at some point Horvat will probably score his 40th this season, and it's a shame somebody scores their first goal as an Islander and it isn't said, or their that's silly. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't lead to winning Stanley Cups. It's great that the Devils won. Lou played a big part in that, but they didn't win because of that, and it actually undermines, I think, all the players that did win with him. This notion that somehow that helped you win. No, what helped you win was fucking Marty Brodeur and Scott Stevens and all the guys who gave their heart and soul, and all those brilliant coaches and Lou's brilliant moves to make it about some of these other things under this, to me, a fake notion of team. Again, let me go back and say that I appreciate that what Lou did in terms of the raising the professionalism, which it badly needed from the change from Garth. That's all true. But some of these other things, they're just silly.
All right, Ed, you got another one for us?
Yeah.
Boy,
CGA.
Sean took a pass on that one, huh?
Yeah. I
No
guess
follow-up?
Sean is
No.
moving on. Sean's running with the clock.
Here, trying to get another question. I'm sure I'll chime in. I don't care.
You don't care. You don't have an opinion that they don't announce.
I agree with you that I do think it's silly.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the angle is. It's just everybody focus on the ice. Everybody focus on the Islanders and what they're doing. Instead of looking at the out-of-town scoreboard. It's so minuscule to me. So I don't care either way. And we all have a scoreboard in our pockets now. If we want to know who's winning the other games,
that part is true. Yeah.
We can reach into our pockets. So I don't care.
That's why I agree that the scoreboard thing isn't that big a thing. I think there's also some stuff about certain things aren't replayed. You don't see much of the other team's goals and things like that. But I'm not there regularly to know. But
they throw them up there. I've seen them. They throw them up there. And sometimes when the odd penalty happens, they don't always play the replay, but they usually do.
Okay.
But all right, Ed, what do you got?
CGS 878 says, how close are the, quote, long-term injured, end quote, to returning?
Unfortunately, I don't have any.
Nobody would ever know that. The guys who travel with
I think we're looking for a gut feeling here for an answer.
I think Pageau
I think he's going to play Tuesday. Yeah, I think he's going to play Tuesday. We know the Clutterbuck is back, and I haven't heard a lot about Matt Barzal.
The Clutterbuck out indefinitely for a while felt like end of the season is out indefinitely.
Yes.
Oliver Wallstrom's out indefinitely. We're not going to see him the rest of the year.
Right.
And then Clutterbuck getting back when he did was a surprise. And I think that's why when Matt Barzal, remember the designation originally was out indefinitely, and everyone was like, and end of the year. And then it was week to week. So, and I guess there have been people that have seen him around the press box, no boot, no limp. So
I think when they first announced that he was week to week, there was kind of a speculation of late March / early April. So I think you cross your fingers and hope that's the case where he can jump into a couple of these final games before the season is over, because they're probably going to need his help to secure one of those wild card spots.
I have a question for you, Sean. You have season tickets?
I do.
Are you the controller of them? Like, are they?
I am the master of the season tickets.
So
yes.
When did the season ticket? When did the playoff invoices go out, and what's like the status of that? I honestly don't know. There's a thing.
They have not. They have not. The only thing that they've done is start renewing for next year, but there has been nothing on the playoffs. I have not received anything about the playoffs yet.
What was it like, say, like 5 years ago when the team was like in the playoff race? Like, did you
Chris,
we used to send out playoff bills like in February and March back in the day.
Yeah, it probably was February, March. Unfortunately, Chris, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there has been nothing about the playoffs, about playoff tickets, nothing.
Maybe that's a Lou thing.
That's why
they're waiting to see what's going to happen.
That's why I said,
no
what
guarantee.
was it like 4 or 5 years ago? You might have picked up on that.
Were you at the arena for their walking through the dressing room? Have you? A lot of season ticket holders had done that. Look amazing.
I missed out
about it.
I missed out on last week. I believe there's another date, the 26th, under the 26th. I'm waiting to find out if I can sneak my crew in there, but I didn't get in on the 5th.
No, people. I mean, they try to do perks to make it, for as a season ticket holder, and people seem to be thrilled with what happened last weekend.
Flying fast and furious in a very short span of time once the renewal emails started going out, because I think they're really trying to get people to stick on. And back then, when those emails went out, that was like during the January fold, where we kind of thought this season was going in the tank.
And whether or not the team was going to rebuild or retool and whatever. So
yeah, it was pre-Bo Horvat, all that stuff. So I think they were kind of like, please stay here. We'll give you a chance to win some Bruce Springsteen tickets at UBS. Like,
I'll be there Easter Sunday.
Bruce. Oh yeah? Is that right?
I had no idea it was Easter Sunday.
I'm there. I'm there 2 nights later.
Wow, look at you! I'm not a Bruce guy.
Yeah,
not a Bruce guy.
That's your problem.
Explains a lot.
Oh no, it's my solution. I'm fine. I sleep very well at night, not listening to the men. But I respect what he's done. But anyway, this isn't a music show. Ed, we'll sneak in one quick one if you have it, and then we got to.
Sure, we'll make it an important one from Trottier 19. He asks, when will UBS Arena put heated lamps in the Heineken Terrace like many outdoor bars, restaurants have? Froze my ass off last night.
That's funny. I was actually up there before the game last night for a brief period of time. Yes, there aren't those heated lamps or whatever you call them, but I did feel some kind of heat going on up there. Like maybe it was coming down from the top or whatever it is. Now, it wasn't a lot. It was still chilly up there, but I think they were doing something. I guess they need to do something more. But hey, look, you talk about this state-of-the-art arena, and you worry about the amenities, and look, it's a party up there. I mean, it wasn't pregame, but like, I've passed by there. I've walked the upper concourse a couple of times, and they actually have a line going into that place for the intermission. Like people are trying to jam in. Yes, wow. They have bouncers. They literally have bouncers at both entrances, and they're making people wait to go in for a 17, 18-minute intermission.
Amazing,
and it's packed to the gills. I don't know. People love it. Look, people go up there and smoke, do that whole thing. They got the DJ up there. Everybody's dancing, having a party.
That's what I'm saying. We've come a long way, because I was at Game 3, Islanders Capitals, where Tavares scored how many seconds into the overtime period.
Yes.
And we sprinted out, and they had the porta potties outside at the Coliseum.
Oh, yeah.
So went outside to go to the bathroom, got back, and a lot of people missed that goal because they were not in the arena, but they were outside the arena online waiting to go to the bathroom. So
and
heated lamps, we've come a long way. I would like my buns toasty while I
party. One more nugget. Speaking of missing the action, one great thing that they've done in the concourse is, basically, and at least I could speak for the lower concourse, there's a screen everywhere in that concourse where as you're walking, you can look left or right, and somewhere the game is on. Like, you're not missing any. You can literally just hang out in the concourse and walk it all night, and it's somewhere. So they have like hundreds of screens down there. So it's great. You know, you're going to get a snack, you're going to the bathroom. You always have the action somewhere
by design
on your way.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So Lou allows that at least. So that's
because
nice.
you spend the idea they want people to know we want you spending money and you still won't miss the game.
There you have it. So that's going to do it for questions,
I'm
Bruins.
just fascinated by the playoff invoice thing. And
Nothing.
And I'm probably showing like my age, and I understand that in this day and age that they could just be like, okay, we made the playoffs. You got till tomorrow to let us know if you're buying. The first 2 rounds, like, things are a little more different than they were back in the day. But we had seasons where I worked there. I'm not talking days. I'm talking, toward the end of my career there, where we would actually still be talking like January or February. Team would be like 8 points out. Do we send invoices? And usually did. So the fact that the bills haven't gone out, I'm also curious as to what other teams have done. So I'm going to ask around.
They gave us like a month for renewals on next season. It was like probably the end of December, and they were like, January 20th, we're going to auto-renew.
For next?
Yeah. You got to either cancel before the 20th, or we're going to auto-renew and start, taking the payments, and they changed to there's a 12-month payment plan, whatever it is.
And what inspired that question, sorry to interrupt you, what inspired that question was just, and this is like really cynical of me, but I started thinking, like, was that Barzal change about week to week kind of a way of saying, wait a second, we're not here to say that this guy is done.
Right.
And we're not done.
Right.
So that's what made me think. I did not expect the answer to be that invoices have not gone out.
And also, I remember the often play, because I would take advantage of this as someone who wasn't a season ticket holder, was Islanders are going to make the playoffs. If you buy 4 games over the next 10, you'll essentially be able to buy every single playoff strip you want. And that's what I would do.
Yep.
Sometimes I didn't even get an opportunity to get out to the 4 games I did purchase, but it allowed me to make sure I got a ticket to every home playoff game.
I remember
again,
doing that.
Hopefully those days are over.
Right.
Although even someone like in my position, that's how I made sure I got to every playoff game.
There you go. Well, that's going to do it for Questions Bruin. Ed, cue the music. We're going to head on out. So, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in to Hockey Night in New York at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY. Want to send a huge, huge thanks for not only joining us here, but Joe, coming down to the studio, the founder of the Isles Fix newsletter and author of New York Islanders A to Z. Fantastic job.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. A great time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, of course, a big thanks to our sponsors, starting with Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington. Check them out at BlueLineDeli.com. Another big thanks to Lost Farmer Brewing Company, located at 63A 2nd Street in Mineola. Check them out at LostFarmerBrewing.com. And a big thanks to Main Street Board Game Cafe, located at 307 Main Street in Huntington Village. Check them out at MainStBoardGameCafe.com. Folks, if you dig what we're doing here at Hockey Night in New York, please rate, review, subscribe here on Twitch, YouTube, on your favorite podcast provider. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Joe, where can we find you on social media and your great content at Isles Fix?
Yeah, just go at Isles Fix, and you can subscribe to the newsletter. It'll be in your inbox every morning, 7:30 to 8 a.m., and it's a full curated edition of everything that happened, local news, beat writers, pop culture, etc. Everything you want to know about the Islanders in 5 minutes to start your day.
Fantastic stuff. And one more time, where can we find the book?
Go to store.bookbaby.com, search for New York Islanders A to Z, or go to our social media and you'll find it in our link in our profile.
Excellent. Chris, where can we find you on social media?
Just throw my plugs back to Isles Fix. They do an amazing job. I try to make that clear at least once or twice a year for people who do our show like this or any show like this. It's a must. For any fan, it's a must. Same thing for Eric Hornick's newsletter, The Skinny. These are essential things that we can't do without, and they're out there. So if you're an Islanders fan and you're not getting Isles Fix, you're really missing out.
Follow Chris at Chris Botta NHL on Twitter. Follow myself at Shoney Hockey. Follow the show at Hockey Night NY on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the TikTok. For Chris Botta, for Joe Buono, for Ed, for Jay, we've been Hockey Night in New York. Have a great rest of your night.